Jerusalem's Bible Lands Museum is showcasing the shofar in a unique, first-of-its-kind exhibit. Sound the Shofar looks at the handcrafted horn blown on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as something much more than a religious object.
There is a link through time that the shofar is unique in bearing witness to the history of the Jewish people and being a very important symbol of our celebrations, of our misery, of our sadness, and of our joy.
The exhibit traces how the shofar's use in ancient times was adopted later throughout Jewish history, and especially in modern-day Israel.
The shofar has been a witness to history from the beginning of time. We know about the shofar from the Bible. From the time that King Solomon was anointed king, the shofar was blown. So we have it up until the most recent, the president of the state of Israel. The last one that was inaugurated was Peres. And when Shimon Peres was inaugurated in the Knesset of the modern state of Israel, they blew the shofar.
The piercing sound of the shofar also rang out in biblical times before the Israelites went into battle as a sign that God was on their side. That also has its echoes in contemporary Israel. Curator Philip Vukosovich says the entire exhibit was inspired by the shofar blown at the Wailing Wall shortly after the area was captured during the 1967 Six-Day War.
Well, the shofar is right here. It's a funny story about the shofar. It's probably the most important shofar in the history of Jewish people, and nobody has ever actually displayed it. Nobody actually even tried to display it.
How did you find it?
I mean, when I started working on this exhibition, this was the first shofar I thought of. As you know, we all know this photo, which is right behind you, about with Rav Goren blowing the shofar, and second day of the Six-Day War, liberation and unification of Jerusalem. It is the moment when it comes to Jerusalem and Jewish people. And of course, that was the first shofar I thought of, and I simply called his son. And I simply asked him, where is the shofar? And he said, well, it's here, right here in the safe. And you know, so we went back and forth discussing how can I borrow it, if I'm going to borrow it, and what we're going to do with it. Eventually, we got it, and I built the whole exhibition around it. Listen, we're talking about maybe even the Holy Grail of Judaism, right? We're talking about one and only shofar blown by the Rav Shlomo Goren. And here it is, for the first time ever.
From the ecstasy in Jerusalem to despair in Europe, this shofar captures the tragedy of one Belgian family during the Holocaust.
We're talking about Israel Mizrahi and Esther and Joseph and Lily, who in 1943 were deported to one of the camps. And then he was sent to Buchenwald, and he was murdered over there. And the rest of the family actually survived. They went back home after the war, and everything was either stolen or sold, and only few items remained. It was some of the photos, including this photo, and the shofar which belonged to Israel Mizrahi. And I know that he blew the shofar maybe a few days or weeks or months before he was taken to the concentration camp.
And for Jews in the early modern period who failed to abide by the community's rules, this shofar was used to expel them from the community.
When you say that something is haram, that simply is forbidden, or you shouldn't do it, or it's not allowed. Right. And if a fellow Jew from a certain community still does it, you can expel him. How do you expel him? Actually, simply blow the shofar. You can do it in a synagogue or in Bet Din Rabbanut, a Jewish court.
I'm not sure if a lot of people knew that blowing the shofar is part of Haram.
Exactly. I actually didn't know myself until we started working on the exhibition.
Yeah, because when you think of Jewish history and these communities that were, people that were expelled, like in the time of Spinoza, for example, for all we know, a shofar was blown when Spinoza was kicked out of the community.
And that's exactly the fact. The shofar was blown when he was expelled, and it was in 17th century.
The earliest depiction of the shofar on exhibit is from the 3rd century, where it's shown here on a decorative slab. There are no shofars on display for visitors, but I asked for one to try my hand at blowing it. Blowing the shofar is actually so much more difficult than it looks. They can be made from the horns of over 100 kosher animals, but depending on what community you're in, they look very differently. Some leave the tips here flat, some leave them curved. You know, they're long, they're short, they're buffed, they're in their sometimes original skin. But no matter what they look like, everybody can recognize the sound of the shofar. It's something the Jewish people have been listening to for over 3,000 years. The Sound of the Shofar exhibit runs until February. Jordana Miller, JN1 News, Jerusalem.